In the shadowy, fog-laden town of Forgotten Hollow, the name Vladislaus Straud was spoken in hushed tones. People called him the Lord of the Vampires, an ancient creature cloaked in darkness, feared as a monstrous figure with a hideous visage. But those stories couldn't be further from the truth. Vladislaus Straud was, in fact, the very opposite of the town's nightmarish tales. He was a strikingly handsome man, tall and lean with sharp cheekbones, dark black eyes, and a presence that could silence a room. There was a magnetism about him, a silent charisma that radiated from centuries of knowledge and wisdom. His voice was deep and smooth, his words carefully chosen with an elegance that hinted at a time long past. Only two people had ever seen the true Vlad and knew the beauty and mystery beneath the legends: Lilith and Caleb Vatore. Caleb and Lilith had met Vlad centuries ago, a fateful encounter that forever bound them as family. He'd found them one stormy night, drenched from the rain and huddled in the shadows, too bold and curious for their own good. They'd been wanderers back then, twin siblings who relied only on each other, fierce and free-spirited, but Vlad saw something deeper in them, a passion for life that even he with all his years admired. So he made a choice he rarely allowed himself to make. He offered them the eternal life he'd lived for so long, and they accepted. Though Caleb and Lilith shared a bond with Vlad, each sibling had a complex, unique relationship with their ancient sire. Caleb, with his kind eyes and open heart, was an idealist. He believed in living harmoniously with humans, seeing no need to inspire fear or drain their blood unwillingly. Over the years, he'd learned to suppress his thirst, feeding only as necessary and often choosing animals instead. Caleb was charming and sociable, frequently going into town under the cover of night to befriend mortals rather than hide from them. Vlad admired Caleb's kindness, even if he found it impractical. The two often argued, Caleb encouraging Vlad to leave behind his old ways and trust that humans might accept them one day. Yet, despite his disagreements with Vlad, Caleb respected the vampire lord as both a mentor and an enigma. Vlad's charisma, his ancient wisdom, and even his moments of coldness intrigued Caleb, who was certain there was more to his sire than centuries of darkness. Lilith, on the other hand, shared Vlad's skepticism of humans. She knew their kind would always be hunted and that showing weakness was dangerous. While Caleb clung to his compassion, Lilith understood the value of caution. She saw humans as fragile and unpredictable, and she didn't quite trust them as her brother did. But Lilith, too, cared for them, and she approached her vampiric life pragmatically, feeding carefully to avoid harm and taking only what she needed. With her sharp wit and guarded nature, Lilith was the one Vlad confided in most. She often visited him at his dark, ornate manor to discuss the mysteries of the vampire world and study his ancient tomes of arcane knowledge. Lilith was fascinated by the hidden magic and secrets Vlad had gathered over centuries, and she'd always listened closely when he spoke of the darker aspects of their existence. In Vlad, she found a mentor and a father figure, someone who recognized her quiet strength and granted her rare glimpses of his own vulnerabilities. Over time, Lilith and Caleb had grown to understand that beneath Vlad's harsh exterior was a creature as conflicted as they were. Though he had been ruthless in his youth, the centuries had worn on him, and he'd grown weary of causing pain. While he was often stern and intimidating, Vlad felt a deep loneliness. He harbored a desire for redemption, a yearning to be more than a monster in the shadows. But he knew better than to reveal his true self to humans. His handsome face and gentle voice would not change their fear if they knew what he truly was. Every so often he ventured into the town's cobbled streets under the veil of night, passing himself off as a traveler or distant nobleman. With his hypnotic gaze and refined manners, Vlad could blend in easily, charming the townsfolk with polite conversation or sharing drinks at the tavern. He was fascinated by their lives, the emotions they experienced so intensely in their brief years. Sometimes he couldn't help but feel a pang of envy, a wish that he could live as they did, untethered by eternity's shadow. But Vlad's charm and compassion could not override his vampiric nature. There were nights when the thirst became too strong, when he had to feed to survive. When that happened, he chose his victims carefully, seeking out those who seemed healthy and strong enough to withstand his bite. He never took more than necessary and always erased their memories of the encounter. Vlad's beauty, his kindness, His very presence often left his victims dazed, convinced they'd merely dreamed of an encounter with a handsome stranger. Yet, despite his careful feeding and hidden kindness, rumors continued to spread. Stories of people disappearing or falling ill were always pinned on him, tales of his supposed cruelty growing with each retelling. To the town, he was a monster, a vampire lord lurking in the shadows of the manor on the hill. And so Vlad accepted his fate, letting the townsfolk believe in their own myths. In some ways, the fear served as a shield, protecting him and his kin from unwanted attention. As the years wore on, Caleb and Lilith watched Vlad's solitude grow. They knew that for all his strength, he longed for a world where he could reveal his true self without fear. Caleb's endless encouragement and Lilith's companionship were what kept him anchored, a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone. In Forgotten Hollow, Vladislaus Straud continued his lonely vigil, the Lord of Shadows and Mysteries. The townsfolk feared him, Caleb questioned him, and Lilith stood by him. And though he remained unseen and misunderstood by the world, to those who knew his true self, he was more than a vampire lord. He was a protector, a mentor, and a lonely, haunted soul, beautiful and kind, his compassion hidden beneath the darkness that both bound him and kept him alive.